today. Dan Carr is joining me now from Freedom Frontline, 1776.com. Dan, it's great to meet you. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to coming on, and of course, I enjoyed listening to Gerard and on MidDays, and it's good to talk to you. And thanks for having me.
You know, I used to manage a lot of bands in my career, and every time you book an opening act, you always want them to be worse than the headliner. So that's kind of who I am. Is I'm just here to fill the spots. But if we can have a good time, we will. I can't believe, Dan, that we're already talking about the 2027 election, and there will be some big issues facing the state of Mississippi and some important decisions to be made for leadership roles in the state as well. I mean, there's already speculation about who may be running for governor.
Yes, sir. A lot of us, around the state, as well, we're talking about who's going to run, speculation. And as a matter of fact, when I leave here, I'm going to have lunch with he's speaking at the Harrison County Republican Club today. Last was in Pike County speaking to Republicans. And whenever we finished, I mean, a lot of people are wanting to talk about, 2027. Who do you think is going to run for governor? Who's going to run for lieutenant governor? Who does Mississippi, need, whenever it comes to being the next governor, or being the next lieutenant governor. So these are conversations that I think are important, of course, among, conservatives in our state. And so I think they're good conversations. But let me remind you, Scott, something that is very important is June 3rd, just in 13 or 14 days, we have, elections here in Mississippi whenever it comes to these municipalities, electing mayors and aldermen. And so we can't forget, to get out and vote June 3rd as well. But I love having conversations about 2027, about who's going to run or who potentially can. I think they're great conversations to have. And I think now's a good time to start having them.
I heard Chad White on with Richard Carr yesterday or day before, and he's leading some of these straw polls, some criticism of him on social media from the MAGA right, but he seems to be the front runner as of now. I think the lieutenant governor probably has aspirations as well, if I had to guess.
Yes, sir. When you look and you talk, Chad is absolutely, in the front runner, whenever you look at, who's going to run for governor, but there's one name, another gentleman who's a businessman here in Mississippi, Tommy Duff, that if he gets in this race, I think that Mr. Duff will kind of clear the field. I think if Mr. Duff doesn't get in the race, I think that the field's going to be crowded. You're going to have people, that will be in that race. But if Duff gets in the race, he's going to clear the field. And I think that potentially, you'll have the state auditor, Chad White. I think he'll stay in that race. And I think, but Delbert and others, I think they'll not get involved in that race, which potentially could have a crowded field for lieutenant governor if Mr. Tommy Duff does run for governor. But one thing to look at as well, Scott, and we all know this, especially in Mississippi, whenever you talk about the MAGA right, whenever you talk about MAGA in general, whoever Donald Trump comes out and supports will be the next governor. If Donald Trump were to get involved, in the 2027 election, whoever that is, they'll be the next governor. They'll be the next lieutenant governor. You cannot, in my opinion, beat Donald Trump in Mississippi. It's not going to happen.
Well, and I think the state has been moving in the right direction, especially when it comes to tax reform, leading some other conservative-leaning states that should follow suit in what Mississippi has done to cut income taxes in the state. I think it's interesting you talk about the lieutenant governor's race. That seems to be something I've learned over the last few months, filling in for Gerard and Richard, is how much power in Mississippi the lieutenant governor really has. And it seems like this particular lieutenant governor, who I don't know personally, I've never spoke with him, but it seems like he has held back a lot of these bills that the state really needs to move forward with for whatever reason.
So the current lieutenant governor, he's held back some reform that us conservatives really want and we really crave and want. Governor Tate Reeves has done a great job. Governor Tate Reeves has been pushing. I mean, he laid out his agenda whenever he started running his second term, some things that he wanted to see happen. So the current governor, Tate Reeves, has done a good job, when it comes to eliminating the state income tax, and whoever the next governor, lieutenant governor is going to be, we need to have somebody that is going to expand on the elimination of the state income tax. Whenever it comes to cutting fraud and cutting waste and abuse and unnecessary spending, whoever the next governor is going to be and the next lieutenant governor is going to be, we need somebody that's going to stand firm, that's not going to back down whenever it comes to cutting some of this waste. And that is one reason why people can like or hate him. But that is one reason why Shad White is the front runner right now. It is because he has been fighting, for some of these things, in terms of cutting fraud and cutting waste. I'm going to tell you another good conservative piece of legislation that I know a lot of conservatives would really like to see happen in Mississippi, and that is whenever it comes to promoting school choice. I think that school choice would be a very, I think it's an ideal piece of legislation. And if we've got the right lieutenant governor, if we've got the right governor, and of course the right speaker, and I believe we do have the right speaker, I believe that we could see school choice passed, and we can have much more needed, conservative policy get passed.
I want to go back to what you mentioned about cutting fraud, waste, and abuse at the state level, because I think that's very important. And I'm certainly not advocating for Shad White, but I see what he is doing in the state, and several other states around the country have followed the lead of Elon Musk and Doge by creating their own states' government efficiency agencies to some degree. And states have been much more effective at taking action against this waste, fraud, and abuse than we've seen Republican members of Congress who talk a good game, get their picture taken with Elon Musk, talk about the need to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, and then when it comes down to it, when the votes are called, they punt, and they don't want to actually take action. States seem to be putting in the work there, including Mississippi.
You're right. And Shad has done a good job, at cutting waste, and he's very active, on social media. Shad's young, he's 39, 40 years old. He is young. And so Elon Musk has made, Doge, obviously, especially among MAGA Republicans and conservatives, he has made cutting waste and cutting fraud. He has put it at the top of the list, whenever it comes to, people. And you're right. A lot of people do talk a good campaign. A lot of people do talk, good talk whenever eliminating or cutting fraud. And then whenever it does come time to do it, they do punt. And so it is good to see states, taking back some of that belongs to the state, and I'm glad to see that there are many states that are doing, some of this cutting, if they do it, at least the states can do it. And so we have the right president, obviously. Donald Trump is the right man for the job. And so I'm thankful that he's there. But we need, whenever you look at Mississippi and you look at moving forward, whoever's going to take that next spot as far as lieutenant governor, it is very important that we as Mississippians make the right choice. And we pick the right. And so that's why I preach, for people to do their homework, people to do their research, look at the candidates, study the candidates. Don't just study what they're saying, but study what they've done. And I think that is one thing that people will find whenever you look at Tommy Duff. Reason why he is so appealing to many is because of his business mind. I mean, whenever you look at somebody that's business genius like him, I see a lot of people want to get on board with that. Want to get on board with, that's what we need for Mississippi. We need somebody who is a business leader. And then you have Shad White, who is cutting waste and cutting fraud. And then people are like, we need Shad White. And I think it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a very, very good race, I think, in 2027.
It's interesting to compare what's happening in the state of Mississippi moving forward to what I'm seeing in Ohio, where Vivek Ramaswamy, another successful businessman with the endorsement of Donald Trump, got the Ohio Republican Party endorsement more than 300 days before the primary. That's unprecedented in Ohio, and I think that we might see something similar in Mississippi and other states that need to move forward with more conservative leadership. We're talking to Dan Carr, Freedom Frontline, 1776.com. One of the priorities I see for the state, as you mentioned as well, is got to be school choice and giving parents more control over their kids' education, and that's been stalled in the state.
You're right. And back to what you said about Ohio with Vivek Ramaswamy is, once again, it goes back to Donald Trump. Donald Trump gets involved, Donald Trump gets engaged, and the same thing will happen in Mississippi. If Donald Trump gets involved, and I don't know if he will or won't, I think he will, but if he gets involved, that race, will be over just Iowa as far as the nominee. Now, of course, we still have to win the general election, but as far as the Republican nominee, if Donald Trump gets involved, he'll win. But yes, when it comes to school choice in Mississippi, we need school choice. I was talking to a principal the other day, and he said to me, Dan, the reason why it's not that I'm against school choice. He said, my school is so good and so strong that if there was school choice, I would have hundreds of people lining up to come to my school, and I don't have the room for them. I don't have the room for all of the people that want to come to my school, because our school, and it's a public school here in the South, it is such a strong school that they'll be lined up. But we need school choice, and we need it bad here in Mississippi.
Dan Carr, great to meet you. I look forward to our next conversation. FreedomFrontline1776.com is the website. We'll talk to Congressman Mike Ezell next here on Super Talk Mississippi.